If you're not okay with Mark staying here, then maybe you shouldn't be living with me at all. She didn't raise her voice when she said it. That was the part that stuck. Calm tone, arms crossed, like she was stating a fact, not delivering an ultimatum. I looked past her and saw a pair of men's shoes by the door. Not guest shoes, worn-in sneakers, lined up neatly like they belonged there. I asked who Mark was. She sighed, already annoyed. Co-worker. Recently split from his girlfriend. Things fell apart fast. She said he just needed somewhere to land for a bit. A couple weeks, maybe less. We'd been living together almost 2 years. Same one-bedroom apartment since right after COVID. Split rent, split groceries, utilities in my name because my credit was better. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. Or I thought it was. I asked why she didn't talk to me first. She said she didn't think she needed permission to help someone. Said I was making it a bigger deal than it was. Said I should trust her. I told her trust wasn't the issue. Shared space was. Boundaries were. You don't move another adult into a one-bedroom without a conversation. She rolled her eyes and said he wasn't moving in. He was just staying. Like wording changed reality. I asked where he was sleeping. The couch, she said, then added, he leaves early for work anyway. That's when I noticed the charger plugged into the wall, backpack in the corner, a half-empty water bottle on the table. This wasn't a plan. This had already happened. I told her I wasn't okay with it. She shrugged and said, I'm not kicking him out. Then she repeated it, slower, more deliberate. So if that's a deal breaker for you, that's something you need to think about. I realized in that moment that this conversation wasn't about Mark. It was about leverage. She'd already decided. She just needed me to fall in line. I said this wasn't what we agreed to when we moved in together. She said relationships evolve. I said evolution doesn't mean ignoring the other person. She laughed under her breath, like I was missing something obvious. That's when the bathroom door opened. Mark walked out, towel around his waist, like he'd done it 100 times before. He nodded at me, polite but comfortable, like I was the guest. I stood there and said nothing while he grabbed clothes off the chair I usually used in the mornings, the one next to the bed. My chair. That night felt off in a way I can't really explain without sounding dramatic, so I won't. She cooked dinner like it was a normal Tuesday, asked me about work. Mark sat on the couch scrolling his phone, headphones in, legs stretched out. I didn't eat. I said I wasn't hungry. Later, I asked again how long he was staying. She said she didn't know. Said pressing her wasn't helping. Said I needed to stop making everything about control. When it was time for bed, she said she'd sleep on the couch, so Mark wouldn't feel awkward. I asked where that left me. She said, don't make this weird. I lay in our bed alone, staring at the ceiling, listening to their muffled conversation from the living room. I stopped trying to interpret tone or intent. I focused on facts. Someone had been moved into my home without my consent. My objection had been dismissed, and I'd been told clearly that staying meant accepting it. That was the moment I stopped trying to fix anything. The next morning, I asked if Mark was leaving that day. She didn't look up from her phone, just shook her head and said he was still figuring things out. Then she added that I needed to stop acting like this was some kind of betrayal. I told her I wasn't acting. I was reacting to a situation I hadn't agreed to. She finally looked at me then, annoyed, and said I was being exhausting. Said I was turning a small favor into a crisis. Said if I walked away over this, it would prove I cared more about control than about her. That was the moment I understood this wasn't temporary in her mind. It was conditional. My comfort existed only if it didn't interfere with what she wanted. I went to work like nothing had happened. Same commute, same desk, same routine. The difference was I wasn't distracted, I was focused. During lunch, I pulled up our lease. I remembered skimming it when we signed, but I read it carefully this time. Every clause, every footnote, there it was. Additional occupants. Any guest staying longer than 14 days required written approval from both tenants and the landlord. Failure to comply counted as a violation. I didn't feel smug reading it. I felt calm. This wasn't leverage I'd been hunting for. It was just reality. When I got home that night, Mark was still there. He'd rearranged the coffee table to make space for his laptop. A hoodie hung over the back of a chair. His presence had weight now, like gravity pulling the room in his direction. She asked if I was done sulking. I said I was done negotiating. She laughed and said I was being dramatic, said I wouldn't actually leave, said I didn't have anywhere else to go. I didn't argue. I went into the bedroom and packed a bag, clothes, laptop, documents, things I couldn't afford to lose. I left everything else exactly where it was. She stood in the doorway watching, waiting for the moment I'd stop and say something emotional. I didn't. Before I left, I told her I'd be notifying the landlord in the morning. I told her I was removing my name from the utilities by the end of the week. I told her I'd continue paying my share of rent only until the lease issue was resolved. She said I was trying to punish her, said I was being manipulative, said Mark would be gone soon anyway, so all of this was unnecessary. I said if that were true, none of this would matter. I walked out with my bag and didn't look back. I stayed with a co-worker for a few nights. Nothing dramatic. Air mattress, clean space, quiet. I slept better than I had in a long time. The next morning I emailed the landlord. I kept it factual. No accusations, no emotion. I explained that an additional occupant had been moved in without my consent and that I was documenting it formally. I attached the lease clause. Then I called the utility companies. Internet, electric, water, everything except gas, transfers, cancellations, confirmation numbers, routine. Around noon, my phone started lighting up. First confusion. Why was the internet scheduled to shut off? Why had the landlord emailed her asking about an extra tenant? Why was I doing this to her? I replied once. One sentence. I said I wasn't comfortable living with an unapproved occupant and that I'd already made my position clear. She said I was embarrassing her, said Mark was already stressed enough, said I was making her look bad. I didn't respond. By evening, the landlord emailed again, copying both of us. He asked for clarification about who was living in the unit and for how long. He reminded us of the potential penalties for violations. She called me 3 times. I didn't answer. Her last text that night said Mark would probably leave in a few days and that we could talk once things cooled down. I didn't reply to that either. The situation had moved past conversation. The first real consequence had landed, and it hadn't required me to argue, persuade, or threaten anyone. Final update. 2 days passed without a word from her. Then the landlord emailed again. This time it wasn't neutral. He stated clearly that an unauthorized occupant was a lease violation and needed to be corrected immediately. He listed the fines. He gave a deadline. No room for interpretation. I wasn't copied after that message. I didn't need to be. She texted me that evening. Just one line. Can we talk? I didn't answer. The next morning, the internet shut off. Right on schedule. I got the confirmation email while I was making coffee. The electric account transfer finalized an hour later. Another automated message. Clean, impersonal. She called. I let it ring. She left a voicemail. Her tone was different now. Tired, defensive, but thinner. She said Mark had to leave. She said he was angry about it. She said she hadn't realized the lease thing was that serious. She said I'd taken things too far over something small. I didn't return the call. That afternoon, the landlord reached out to me directly. He thanked me for documenting the issue early and said that since I'd already removed myself from the apartment, he was willing to release me from the lease without penalty. 1 processing fee, digital paperwork, effective immediately. I signed within 5 minutes. That's when the texts started coming faster. She said she felt blindsided, said she thought we were a team, said she never imagined I'd actually walk away. She said I could have handled it differently. She said she wished I'd fought harder for us. I didn't reply. From what I pieced together later, Mark didn't have as many options as she'd implied. He stayed 1 more night after the landlord's warning, then left in a rush. Took his backpack, took his charger, didn't bother folding the blanket. She was left with a full rent payment, utilities she'd never managed before, and a landlord watching closely. A few days later, she asked if I'd consider coming back temporarily, just until she figured things out, just until she found a roommate or another solution. I told her no, 1 word, nothing else. Once the lease release was finalized, I forwarded her the confirmation email and blocked her number. Not dramatically, not out of spite, just to close the door cleanly. I went back to the apartment one last time to collect the rest of my things. I coordinated it through the landlord so she wouldn't be there. The place felt smaller than I remembered, not dirtier, not trashed, just hollowed out. The couch was back where it used to be. The extra shoes were gone. The apartment looked like it had lost momentum. I boxed my things. Clothes, books, kitchen items I'd paid for. I didn't linger. Before I left, I set my keys on the counter. No note, no message. Just keys and empty space. I didn't feel triumphant walking out. I didn't feel angry either. I felt settled. Over the next few weeks, I heard indirectly that she'd struggled to keep the place, that she'd had to borrow money, that she'd told people the breakup came out of nowhere. I didn't correct the story. I didn't check her social media. I didn't wait for karma. I didn't need closure beyond the one I'd already taken. I didn't ruin anything. I simply removed myself from a situation where my boundaries didn't exist. Everything that followed happened without my involvement. And once I walked away, it stopped being my problem.